On Tuesday, the 17th of October, protesters gathered outside the Ukrainian parliament to demand a great political reform. However, after a day of demonstrations, some of the protesters set up tents and stayed the night. Clashes erupted with law enforcement officers. The event was co-organized by Mustafa Nayyem, a Ukrainian reformist lawmaker, and former Georgian president and Odessa regional governor Mikhail Saakashvili. Let's take a look at how the protests began.
Він крав, я не знаю, крав він, не крав, але кажуть, і депутати кажуть, і люди кажуть, що він
каже, що цей законопроект має подати президент, а не депутати.
Joining us in the studio is Inna Borzilo, Chief Executive Officer at Center UA, to find out more about how and why these protests began. Inna, what can you tell us about who actually put forward the idea and how quickly the people gathered around the idea?
Hello. Actually, yes, I represent Center of United Actions and civil society, Center UA, together with reanimation package of reforms, Euromaidan, initiative of real actions and other initiatives from civil society were the one who put this idea on the table. And this is actually for the first time since the Revolution of Dignity when we managed to gather the efforts of different political parties and civil society organizations among or around these demands of great political reform.
So you put the idea on the table, and who was around the table?
Oh, there was a lot of different politicians, and actually the co-organizers of these street actions that lasted for 3 days were 6 civil society organizations. I mentioned 9 political parties, including Saakashvili's political party, including Chumak's political party and movements, including Samopomich, including other political parties.
So some of them are well established and represented in the parliament, and some of them actually resurfaced after quite a long time, like the European part of Ukraine. We haven't heard about them for a while.
For years, yes, for years.
Do you think they were just, I don't mean the European Party alone, but some of the organizations attracted by the mass scale of the protest, or they wanted to actually put their effort in?
I think that some of the partners were glad to try to be in some big idea. Because, as I've already mentioned, it's for the first time since 3 years. We were gathered around some demands. And that's why, as you mentioned, those political parties who were in the past or who were kept silent for a while, they joined it also. But later, the initiative was made by civil society organizations because we understood that as civil society organization, we don't have any capacity to mobilize the thousands of Ukrainians. And political parties, they do have. And if and when we found this core of our unity, we proposed this idea and we found actually the support from the different political parties. And that's why we based our cooperation on the memorandum, which absolutely clearly defined the core of our cooperation. And these are 3 demands. Any other initiative, any other calls pronounced from the scene were the initiative of those who then pronounced and were up to their responsibility.
Let's have a look at the demands of the great political reform. So, as Inna has already said, creation of anti-corruption court, MPs have to be stripped of their parliamentary immunity, and there have to be changes to the electoral system. What changes are meant, actually?
change to electoral system on parliamentary elections. Now we have this mixed system since the Yanukovych period, which allowed him to compound his majority in the parliament through the single mandate districts, where actually in majority of cases corrupted politicians were elected. And this is a channel how corrupted politicians get to the parliament and protect themselves with the parliamentary immunity.
A question at once. Do you mean that they do not get to the parliament through party lists?
I think that there will be less chances, and they're giving bribes with the new electoral system which we propose, which is called open parliamentary list. This is the proportional system, traditional one. It will be, let's say, more expensive to bribe the district, because the district will be much bigger. It will be, the Ukrainian oblast will be one district, and it will be just economically very stupid to bribe the people, because there will be no guarantee that a person from a parliamentary list will get the mandate, because this is open list, which means that a voter influences on whom will get the mandate.
When do you think we will be able to feel the results of the reform? When you and I will vote according to the new law?
I think that, I hope, and we will do everything in order to vote according to the system on the next elections in 2019.
And here we have infographics again, as Inna said, but it's worth repeating. 6,000 people took part in the massive rally, which, by the way, organizers avoided to call a protest. 9 political parties, 6 non-governmental organizations, 11 MPs from different factions in the parliament, and 3,500 law enforcement officers. Now, having the experience of Euromaidan and what happened there between demonstrators and the police, how sure you were, or how unsure, that the event will go peacefully?
Of course, we hoped, and we announced this rally as an absolutely peaceful, let's say, actually protest against non-doing things in the parliament, against non-implementing promises of the politicians. So we hope that it will be peaceful, and actually those small clashes that we had, we still can't be sure who was the provokers of these clashes, and it didn't have mass character. That's why let's call that we have some progress in law enforcement bodies, and those officers who protected the security at the square, they were quite polite. And of course, the amount of these law enforcement officers showed that the rally was a surprise for authorities, and it made them a bit scared, because they didn't know for what to expect from people with flags, from protesters who come from different regions. They just have never faced this kind of protest since the Revolution of Dignity. They didn't know what will be the mood at the Constitutional Square those days.
Now, about other surprises. Were you surprised, and if so, then how surprised you were that the result came rather quickly?
What result?
I mean, they voted today for
something.
For something.
With which result?
So?
Let's say that our rally has its own victories and its own losses. And among our victories is indeed that the parliament, for the first time since 3 years, has voted for some electoral draft laws on electoral reforms. This is a huge step forward, because all parliamentary factions, they were absolutely okay with the status quo, with the existing system, which allows them, despite their promises to change this electoral system in 2014, to be sure that through the single mandate districts they will get the mandate again. So I think that this step forward, this progress, was achieved only thanks to the pressure of the street. Peaceful pressure of the street. And today, unfortunately, none of three draft laws alternatives that were registered in the parliament didn't get enough voices to become a law. But from the other hand, it opens the window of opportunity to register a new progressive alternatives. And that's the point on which we will now focus our efforts, and we'll prepare such alternative to register it probably in November. As soon as possible is better.
Thank you very much, Inna Borzillo. I remind you, she is the Chief Executive Officer at Center UA, a prestigious Ukrainian public organization. We'll be back in a minute.